Okay, good evening. We're up to Samech Gimel Amid Beis. We are for about 10 lines up. Amrav Yehuda Amarav. Amrav Yehuda Amarav. Yoidim Hoyi Yisrael Ba'avoidis Kechavim Shein B'mamish. B'nei Yisrael knew be'emes that there's nothing to avoid the Zara. There's nothing, nothing there. The whole reason they did avoid the Zara was to permit arayos. That's the whole reason. They're very famous Gemara guys. Says Rashi, El lahatel lehem arayos b'fehesya, shayitzron takfan al arayos. The Yetzer Hara was strong for arayos. The Yetzer Hara for immorality was strong. Amru, what do they say? Nifrik kol ol Torah me'aleinu. Let's throw off the whole yoke of Torah from upon us. And then they won't focus and give us musa on arayos. So in other words, it was a. My father used to say it's a futch. It's make believe you're interested in avodah zara. You'll go ahead and get stuff for avodah zara, but for arayos, you're fooling it. But the reason you did it was for arayos. The reason you did it for arayos. Now, I'll share with you the words of the Gra. I share with you. I sent it out. I sent out two things today. One was a much longer one. It's about Oiv, and the other one was about the Vilna Gaon, which we're going to see. We'll see right now. Layavdu. I don't want. Are you looking at the words Layavdu? You have a check there? Good. Layavdu avoid Zara lahatal marayis b'fehesya. Okay, a pasuk in Hosea. Ami be'etza yishol. Etza usually means counsel. Here they means like wood. They asked from wood. Umakla yagadloi. And a stick would be tell to him. Ki ruach sinunim hita. So an eitz guys and a makal is referring to avoid Zara. It's referring to Azara, but ki ruach sinunim hita, because the ruach of znus hita, pasuk in Yeshaya, right? In other words, you make like, you're asking the makal, you're asking the eitza, which the eitz, the wood, these are idols. But why are you doing it? Ki ruach sinunim hita, because the ruach of immorality. V'yaznu mitachas Eloheihem. The ayin itzayt zari brings now. Here's what I want. Ma'ad ma'agoyin hagra. Kach kiblu b'yadeinu min hagoinim. They have a Kabbalah from the time of the Goinim. Ish mi piyish, pierce down ad Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. In other words, the Gra is telling you a Messiah all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, fellas. Shekol avodah zara hayitzarach avodas davar erva. In every avodah zara there was a davar erva. Ulechen kesiv eitzel kol avodah zara vayiznu achrei haba'olim. And therefore, when it says they served avodah zara, it doesn't say vayifen. Vayifen means what? And they turned. Vayifnu, and they turned. It says vayiznu. The lashon of znus also means turning. Znus means you're turning away. But why did you opt to use the lashon of znus to go ahead and stress that what? The reason of avodah zara because of znus. V'kama amazeh v'zana. So that's the limud. That's the group. Everything has avodah zara. So I was thinking, fellas, if you look in Parshas Kiseitze, it says v'ro ba ervas dava v'shav me'acharecha. Hashem will see an ervas davar, and what will he do? He'll turn away from you. Hakadosh Baruch Hu can't exist when there's nus. Hakadosh Baruch Hu can't exist in the nus. Therefore, it would make sense. Avodah zara, when you turn away from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, go to avodah zara. Then znus is applicable, because as long as there's Hakadosh Baruch Hu can't exist with immorality, right? That's what Bilam taught them by Baal Peor. He wasn't able to go ahead and curse them, but he showed them, how the God of the Jews cannot exist in an area, an environment of immorality, and therefore it would make a lot of sense that they matter avodah zara for znus. The interest was in the znus. They would turn away from Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So very, very nice. I like it because I said it. Very nice tushtel. Masir Meshashia. This concept that you just told me this concept that you just told me that they only did it because of Avodah Zarah for Znus, I'm going to ask you a question on that. The pasuk says, "Kiskar b'neihem mizbechaysam." Now, what do you mean, "Kiskar b'neihem mizbechaysam"? Amar Rav Elazar explains that Ka'adam sheyesh le gaguyim al b'noi, like a person has an emotional attachment to his son, right? So too they had a personal attachment, right? It was Kiskar b'neihem, like the zichron on your son, like the emotion of a son, mizbechaysam, or their offerings to the Avodah Zarah. So you see that what they had a taiva for Avodah Zarah. It wasn't just what motivated by znus. Well, says you're right. They have a taiva, basa davikube. After they became attached to the Avodah Zarah, then they had a taiva for the Avodah Zarah. But the MS what? The original Avodah Zarah was znus. Toshma. Okay, we're going to have another kasha on this concept. Another kasha on this concept of what? That the whole reason they did Avodah Zarah was for znus. Toshma. The pasuk in Vayikra, in the Teichach says, the pasuk says in Gansin, "V'yishmanti es b'moisechem, v'chrati es chamonechem, v'nasati es pigreichem al pigrei gilulechem," and I'll put your bodies on the pigrei, on the bodies of your gelulim, v'nela nafshi eschem. And so the Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Loshin, "V'nasati pigreichem," I'll put your dead bodies al pigrei gilulechem. Amr Eliyahu at Tzaddik. Amru Eliyahu at Tzaddik. Hayamachsa al tapuche rav shubushalayim. There was a terrible rav in Yerushalayim, and Eliyahu was looking at the people who were bloated as a result of the rav. They were bloated. Pamachas mata tinak, found a child. Shaya tapuach umutal ba'ashba. They threw him out. He was blown up. They threw him out to die. Amaloi, Eliyahu said, "Mi ezim mishpacha ata." So Amaloi mishpacha plainus. I'm from this so and so. Ani. Amaloi klum nishtayir me oisim mishpacha. Eliyahu said, "Is anyone left from your family?" Amaloi lav chutz mimeni. I'm the last vestige. Amaloi said Eliyahu, "Imani melamedcha davar. If I'll teach you something, shatachai boy, that you'll be able to live, atalamad." Amaloi, "Hey, yeah, I'll do it." So Amaloi said Eliyahu to him, "B'chol yoim, you say every single day, Amaloi emor b'chol yoim, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad." That's why you should say that every day. So Amaloi, now this child is dying. This child is lying in a garbage dump with a distended stomach. And what does he say? Hus. He says to Eliyahu, "Hus, be silent. Shlohaske b'shem Hashem. Lamdu aviv imay. I won't go ahead and say Hashem Hashem that my parents didn't teach me." So what do you see? Miyad hoitzi yerasai mechekoi. What did he do? He took his getchka out of his pocket, and he hugged it, and he kissed it. Ashnifka kreisai, till finally his stomach went ahead and burst open. V'nafli yerasai la'aretz, and he fell down his getchka to the ground. V'naflu aleha, and he fell on top of it. L'kaim hashenemar, v'nasati pigreichem, I'll put your pigreichem, your corpses, I'll pigrei gilulechem, on the corpse of your what? Of your Avodah Zarah. So he's lying on top of the Avodah Zarah. The bottom line is, look how much you're telling me you have this child. You're telling me it's for snus. Look what he's willing to do for his Avodah Zarah. Obviously, he loved his Avodah Zarah. Gemara gives the same teretz. Says after they were kosher to it already. Tashma. Okay, this is a very famous Gemara, fellas. We know that Bisman Hazeh, you think about it, you read the Navi or the Gemara, the first bias, we know Avodah Zarah was a huge problem. A huge problem. Avodah Zarah was a huge problem. Yeshua failed in getting rid of Avodah Zarah. It was in Eretz Yisrael throughout history, the early part of the history of Klal Yisrael, it was a huge problem, right? Huge problem. Bisman Hazeh, we may have Taivas, but Avodah Zarah is not one of them. No one's taking a little getchka out of his pocket and kissing it and dying for it. No one, we don't understand such a thing. The reason is this Gemara. I'm going to lead to a kasha. Okay, so this pasuk is speaking about the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and they're establishing the second bias. They're establishing the second bias. Now, the first bias was destroyed because of the big three. Gemara in Daf Tes in Yuma. A big three. And, the one that they guess they could get rid of was what? Is Avodah Zarah. They tried to get rid of it. It was at a terrible point. So what does the pasuk say? Tashma. Vayizaku b'kol gadol el Hashem Elokehem, and they cried out. They cried out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Rashi says the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, if they cried out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my Omar, why did they cry out? Omar Rabbi Yehuda, Vitema Rabbi Yonason, Baya Baya. That's a lashon of ana whoa, whoa, right? Whoa, Hainu the Achrei Lebesa. This is what caused the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, the time of Avodah Zarah. V'kol yola heichala, and it caused the heichal to be burnt. Right? V'katlinu l'tzadikim, and it caused the death of tzadikim. V'aglinu l'Yisrael me'arayu, and it caused the what? B'nai Yisrael to be exiled from the land. V'adayin hu mirakid beinam, and the time of Avodah Zarah is still dancing among us. It says klum yavitalon, right? The reason you gave it to us is that Ella Kadei Lekabuli Beyigra to get schar. In other words, you have a type of Avodah Zarah, you fight the type of Avodah Zarah, and you'll get schar. So therefore, you gave it to us. Lo iyu ba'inin v'lei agrabina. We don't need it, and we don't need the schar for it. Okay, so basa. So what do you see? That they had a type of Avodah Zarah. Man, that's nus. They weren't davening to get rid of the type of his nus. They were getting rid of the type of Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara answers basa daviku be'enachinami. It's after what? After you were kasha. Comes to mind the Gemara. I think we're going to see at the end of the Masechta, the Maisa with Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi had a shaila in Tumah of Tyra. They couldn't answer it. Menashe came to him in a dream. Menashe, who put a getchka in the heichel, came to him in a dream, and he said, and Rashi said, "A chacham is such a chacham, and you went after Avodah Zarah." And you already told Rav Ashi, the great Rav Ashi, had you been alive, you would have jumped on the cloak of Avodah Zarah. You would have jumped on it. Ad kedei kach. Here is Gemara. When you learn about type of Avodah Zarah, it doesn't mean anything to us. But that Gemara illustrates the type of Avodah Zarah, how powerful it was. Rav Ashi, Gedolei Amarayim, the one who put down for eternity, our Gemara, everything. Rav Menashe the king, who does. Well, he has a chelik in Olam Haba, doesn't have a chelik as a subject we'll get to, but the bottom line is you get an idea. Now, Baruch Hashem, they got rid of the type of Avodah Zarah. Now the Gemara asks questions on that concept that it was because of Znus. The Gemara now will go ahead and deal with that subject of the type of Avodah Zarah. Very, very fascinating Gemara, guys. So what did they do? Yasvu Tilsi Yoima. They went ahead b'tainisa. They sat 3 days in the tainus. Again, they're davening to get rid of the type of Avodah Zarah. They sat 3 days in a tainus. The Teres Chaim says Geshmak, guys. 3 is very, very symbolic. He said that Esther was 3 days. Yoina was in 3 days. By Yosef they were in Mishma for 3 days. They put the brothers in. 3 is symbolic of waiting and delaying and having a tainus. Boy Rachmei, after 3 days that they davened at the Yetzer Hara should be mevatel. Naftali pitka merakia. A petek fell out of Shemayim. That was an ice that, in ours, it's true. Okay, that's it. There's no more time for Avodah Zarah. Gone. Reb Chanina, Shmamina, Reb Chanina says, Shechois Mishal Kodesh Baruch Hu emes. The chasima of a Kodesh Baruch Hu is emes. And so you had a Kodesh Baruch Hu signing off on this. Nafik, Kigurya Denura, Mebeis Kodesh Kedoshim. It came out. The type of Avodah Zarah came out like a fiery lion from the base Kodesh Kedoshim. Amalu an Navi, the Zechariah said, Li Yisrael, Hainu Yitzur Avodah Zarah. That's the Yitzur of Avodah Zarah, right? Bahade did the Katavsile, when they were grabbing it, Ishtamit Binise Minei, a hair fell from it. Va'azal Kole Ba'arma Meas Parsi, and the lion it screamed for 400 parsa. Heichi Nevad, what did they do with it? He was screaming. They said, Heichi Nevad, Dilma Mishmei Rachmei Alayu, the Shemayim will hear him crying out, and Hashem Alav Rachmanis. Amalo Navi said, Zechariah, Shadua Biduda da Avara, put him in some type of lead canister, because you are Ba'avara, and cover it up with lead. The Shoiv Kole, it'll go ahead and absorb the sound. Like you won't hear anything. Ichsiv, by Yoimer Zois Harisha, this is the Yetzer Hara. By Yashlech El Toicha Eifa, they put it into this. By Yashlech Evan Haferes Apia, and they put this Evan Haferes Apia. Okay, so we see that's what happened to the type of Avodah Zarah. So what's the inyan of coming out of the base Kodesh Kedoshim? Guys, what's the inyan of coming out of base Kodesh Kedoshim? So Teres Chaim says like this: He said in a person's that a person and the world are a person is an olam. A person is the olam. Where does the Yetzer Hara starts in the heart and it spreads. So too, he goes, where was the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah? It was in the place where the world started, which was the Evan Shasiya. The Evan Shasiya is the rock that the Aron rested upon. It was the base Kachik Kedoshim. So Memela, just as the Yetzer Hara starts in us in the center, and we're symbolic of the world, so too the Yetzer Hara was residing right in Makim, the Kachik Kedoshim of all places, and that's where it came out from. Now to hear that it fell, that's why we still have Taivas with something. Anyway, says so Amru Chacham said, Hayel Veis Ratzon Hu, since we see our tefillas is miskabel and shemayim, let's go for it. So why did they daven for? Niboy rachmei yitzur da'aveira. So they daven to get rid of the Yetzer Hara for znus. So boy rachmei, they daven, and imsu biyadayu, and Taka was given over to them, and Chavshua, and they also they took the Yetzer Hara and they put it away. So till Siyam, for 3 days, iboy beyasa bas yuma l'chayla. They needed an egg for a chayla. They couldn't find an egg. You know why? Because the chickens had stopped laying the eggs. Because as soon as they got rid of Taiva Avodah Zarah, all procreation stopped. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Right? So everything stopped. So Chum said, Hechi Never, what should we do? Niboy Palga, right? Go ahead and daven that a person should go ahead and only want his wife and no one else. Palga Merkiel Yavi, they don't give you half. So they went ahead and they put some type of choil in the. These are obviously these are allegories. They somehow put some type of in the eye of the Taiva the Zara. They put some type of some type of drug, and a honey bay. It helped igri inshi b'kroiseha that a person does not have taivas for his relatives. A person doesn't have taivas for his mother. A person doesn't have taivas for his sister. So I guess before then they did have a taiva for that. So before they did have a taiva for that. So therefore. I mean, you have a mice in Vayishlach. Anna Anna was with his mother and had a child, something like that. I mixed things, but you see that it did happen. It did happen, right? No. In that parsha, I don't have time to look for it, but Anna was. I'm missing the name. One person was with his mother. So his father was his brother. His father was his brother. Obviously, was with his mother, right? So you see that such a thing. It was in the Torah. So you think such a Torah existed. So that helped that that they got rid of Torah for Avodah Zarah in total, and for Znus they got rid. At least it helped for relatives. Okay. Amrav Yehuda Amarav. Maisa bin Nachris Achas Shoysa Choyla biyoser. There's a Maisa with a Nachris, a Gayata, and she was very, very sick. She was very, very sick. And what did she do? So Amra im tamoid hahi isha mecholya, meaning if this isha herself goes ahead and gets better from her disease, I'll go ahead and go serve every avodah zarah in the world to thank them for saving me. Amda, she got better. The halcha l'chol avodah zarah sheba'olam. Kima shegia lepa'ar. She got to the avodah zarah called pa'ar. Shalom l'kaimrim. She asked the priests, "B'ma avduluzu? How do you serve this avodah zarah? How do you serve this?" So Amrullah, they said, "Oklin tardin, eat beets. V'shois and sheikha, drink beer. Umatzrizim b'faneha, and go defecate in front of it." Amra mutiv shetachsa hu isha l'choleha v'leithavar avodah zarah. Better that what? Better that I'll be sick than to debase myself and do that. Better for me to go back and being sick. And this was a nachris. And now the Gemara takes that and runs with it. Atam beis Yisrael ain't a Cain. You did not have problems debasing yourself. It says, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Hanitzmodim, right? Lebal Pa'ar. You would dovik lebal Pa'ar. Kitsamit psil. Like on a Rashi says, you like put a jar on top of earthenware and you put wax around it. However, but you were clinging to Hashem. Kishtei tomorrow sadvuka izu bezu. Like two palm trees clinging to each other. In other words, when it came to Avodah Zarah, you were nitzmodim. You were very, very tight. You were so strong, attached to it. When it came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's like two palm trees that you can go ahead and separate. That's the way Rashi learns. That's the way Rashi learns. Some Sefer says that it's the shvach, that two palm trees, when you go ahead, when you separate them, you still have the lachlukas of each one, but some still it's totally dry. So he learned it as a positive. In the opposite also, Hanitzmadin lebal pa'ar is kitsamid al yedei isha, right? It's like a person who is with an isha. V'ata veikim b'Hashem Elokechem devuka mamish. By an isha, when you b'shas tashmish, you're not you can move. Mashain came with deveikim b'Kodesh Baruch Hu. Tanabanan Maisa b'Savta ben Olis. That was his name. He was a Jew, and his name was Savta ben Olis, from the city of Olis. He went ahead and rented out his donkey to a certain woman. They came to this avodah zarah called Baal Pa'ar. She told him, "Himtim, wait." After she came out and did what she did, he said to her, "Listen, you wait." Adam tini she said to him, "Lo Yehudi ata, aren't you a Jew?" So yeah, so good, I am. So nichnis par, he went inside and he par b'fanav, went to the bathroom, and not only do that, he wiped himself on the avodah zarah's nose. In other words, he wanted to be mevaza the avodah zarah. He wanted to be mevaza the avodah zarah. They praised him. No one ever served like this. Like, oh wow, you really did it. Now the bottom line is he didn't do the right thing, as we're going to see in a second. Because if you serve it even to be mevasa it, you're wrong. Even if you mechav to mevasa, or you're wrong. So throwing an evan at the markulis is also problematic. Even if you have to stone it, like you're throwing a stone at it, that's the way you serve it. Rav Menashe Rav Menashe was going to a place called Beit Turta. They said there's an avodah zarah here. So what did he do? Shakel pisa. He took a pisa. He took a stone or some plot of earth and shadabe. He threw it at the avodah zarah. They told him. In other words, he threw it at it in a debasing way. Here's the avodah zarah. He threw it at it. So Amaloi Markulis. They say 1 second. That's Markulis. So Amalahu Azarik Evan Markulis Tanan. It says that how do you serve it? By throwing a stone in it. So Asa Shalbe Midrash of Nasha came yes base medrash if you did the right thing. Gamaloi, they said Azarik Evan Markulis Tanan. The Alpha Gavdim Mischavan Lemirgamai. Even though you mechavan to go ahead and stone it, you did the wrong thing. So Amalahu, so he said Ezel Ishkala. Let me go take it back. Amaloi Echan Anoitel Echan Anois and Chayev. Whether you go ahead and throw it or take it back, Yechayev. Why are you taking back Yechayev? By taking it back, you're leaving space for another person to go. So it's too late. You did it, but it wasn't the right thing to do. But that was the sugya of avodah zarah. Now we're in the parsha of Elohein Haniskalim, and the next thing we discuss is someone who goes ahead and gives his son to a molech. Now there's 3 parshiyos that deal with a molech. One is in we Chumash here. This one might have go ahead. Okay, I haven't. Thanks. So both are in the parsha of Arayos. It's very interesting. It will be very geschmack. It'd be very geschmack, but it depends. It may not be an avodah zarah, but again, according to the data, that's avodah zarah. It would make sense that it's in the parsha of Arayos, since avodah zarah is what. So we have in Vayikra in the parsha of Vayikra Yudches Pasuk Chaf Aleph. It says, "Umizaracha lo sitein lahavir lamoilech," and from your children you should not give. Lahavir pesru la moilech, leiseschalu l'shem elekecha ani Hashem. So mizarch leisitein is important. Lahavir is important for us to know. The next parsha takes place in in the Parshat Kedoshim. We're discussing the punishments. So there it says that's the Azhara, and here's the punishment. Vel bnei Yisrael, this is Chaf Beis. Vel bnei Yisrael Taimar ish bnei Yisrael umin ager hagor b'Yisrael asher yitei mizaru l'moilech most yumas ama oretz yirgemu b'aven. That ama oretz, the people, they should go ahead and stone him. So here you learn out that the Isser is skila. So that's the second parsha. The third parsha is in Devarim, in Shaftim. It says la yimatzi b'cha marve b'noy upitay be'esh. Okay, and as we'll see as we go through it. Now, exactly what moilech is, I decided I'm going to give you the discussion of the Rishonim before we do the Gemara. So I went through each source individually, but Vishinantam went ahead and synthesized it all together. So it'll be much easier to go through. Okay, so this is a through machlok. Exactly what was moilech? What was it? What did they do? We're going to have three shitas, guys. We're going to have the shita of, actually four shitas. We're going to have the shita of the Rambam, the shita of Rabbeinu Bechai, the shita of Rashi, and the shita of the Ramban. Ketzad oisa. So you know it has something to do with piercing through fire. Madlik eish gedoyla. This is the lashon of the Rambam. They'd light a big fire. V'loikeach miktsas zaroi. He would take not all of his children, only part of his children. Umoisrei l'kaineihem oivdei eish, and he would give it over to the priest who served the fire. V'oisen kahanim noisnim haben la'aviv, and then those kahanim, after you gave it over to them, they would give it back to the father. So the father would take him through the fire. So the protocol was they'd light a big fire, you'd go ahead, take the child, give it to the priest, they'd give it back to you, and you would go ahead and go through the fire. Right. He would go through with his feet from one side to the other, in the middle of the flames. They would not burn him. They would not burn the child for the moilech. We know there were other avodah zaras that they did burn. After all, Achaz wanted to burn Chizkiyahu. We saw, if not for the fact that his mother knew the fire salamander. Ella behavara bilvad hoisa avodah zu sheshma moilech. That was the way you served it, by going ahead and going through it. The Rambam and avodas kechavim vav gimel. That's the Rambam. That's the Shittas Rambam. So Shittas Rambam, key, you had to give it over. Father went through the fire with it, and he wasn't burnt. The Rabbeinu Bechai, Vayikru Yudches, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Kasav. This is his lashon. Avodah Zara Haisa Sheshma Moilech. It was an Avodah Zara, and its name was Moilech. V'choik ha'avodahu. What was the law of serving this Avodah Zara? Sha'av hoyamavres benoy ben shtei medura shalesh. A father would pierce his son through two maduras, pyres of fire, ashe yisroif, until he burnt v'yamas and he died. He killed his kid. V'hoyse daitam ki behavir av echad mibanav yinoslu shar habanim v'yichyu. In other words, by it says mezaroi, you can't give all your children. It was meduyik in the Rambam. The Rambam said also one child. By giving this one child, you'll save the other children. V'yatzliach b'chol asher yifna. Metzliach every place he turns. It's a lashon from David HaMelech. Okay, that's Rabbeinu Bechai vayikru yiches. So you have two conflicting dayas. You have the Rambam and Rabbeinu Bechai. Rashi vayikru. Rashi in that pasuk says sha'avodas hamoilech kachi. You give your son to the priest. But he didn't give it back. It's not the fight. The father didn't do it, like the Rambam said, but what? They did it. The shamashim of the Avodah Zarah did it. So really, the only difference between Rashi and the Rambam is that who did it, who put him through the fire. Good, but according to Rashi, also he's in agreement with the Rambam that he wasn't burnt. Our Ramban sham choylik v'soiver she'ena chayiv at sheyaver b'soicha eish mamish. You didn't walk through the fire; you had to be in the fire. V'gam eina pirisha koimrim avirim beish k'devei Rashi sham elisha av atzmai moisru l'koimrim l'shem kutzim. The father would give it over like the Rambam. V'koimrim oisim by tenufa oyagosha, and like a carbon, they would go ahead and wave him or bring him close l'fnei amoylech in front of the avodah zarah. Umachzirin oisoi lideya av. They return it to the father. Va'av loichai umaviru b'lava eish, and the father would take him and put him in the fire. V'zeu umaviv beno ubitay be'eish. V'oid kasav shevadei hoya haben meis. Vadei, the son would die. Melava eish, from the fire. Umasha kari l'zeh ha'toira havara. Why is it called havara? It's mashma you pass through. Kilahoya mamtina ad sheyiyu Ephraim. They didn't wait till he was ashes. El rak shetimshel bo ha'or. Says the Rambam clearly. They would kill him, and it says Havara. He's asking a question to himself. Havara is mashma passing through. Passing through, mashma doesn't die. He says, no. He would die, but they wouldn't wait till his whole body is what? Ashes. They would pass it through, but he'd be dead. So you have Shitas Rabbeinu Bechai and Rambam saying they burn him. You have Shitas Rashi and what? And the Rambam saying not. Either way, it's a bizarre thing. Again, there's a question whether it's avodah zarah or not. Our Mishnah would lend itself to believe it's not avodah zarah because it's considered Elohein and Niskolim separately. It says in our Mishnah, right? We're giving a list of the 18 cases of stealing the Torah. We're saying over avodah zarah, and we're saying molech when it's said separately. Okay, now there could be a reason it's said separately because it's a separate issa. Even Shlekadaka, we'll see it. Bes Hashem. So you got a lot of the Gemara beforehand, but I thought that it was very interesting to give us a perspective. Says the Mishnah. I know this, and the reason we're listening to this is because we're giving your children to the Moilech. You have to give it over to the Moilech and pass them through fire. You give it to the Moilech, but you don't go ahead and pass it through the fire. Again, the pasuk says, you shouldn't give, to give, and havir, two separate actions, two separate verbs, right? Giving it over and being mavir. Ketani avodah zarah, our Mishnah learns avodah zarah, v'ketani moilech, and it learns moilech. As two separate things. So Amar Rav Oven, it's not our Mishnah, command Amar moilech la avodah zarah. Our Mishnah is according to the opinion that avodah zarah, the moilech is not avodah zarah. The Tanya, echad lemoilech ve'echad l'shar avodah zarah chayiv. Whether it's moilech or other avodah zarah chayiv. This Tana is mashma that what? It is avodah zarah. Right? The laws of Shimon oimer la moilech chayiv shaloi lemoilech pata. Right? You pata why? Because it's not an avodah zarah. Amar Rabbi, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Chanina ben Tignis amud over echad. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Chanina ben Tignis both say the same thing, that it's not avodah zarah. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon hada amaran. So what is it? Some say it's kishuf. Some type of kishuf, right? Rabbi Chanina ben Tignis the Tanya, Rabbi Chanina ben Tignis oimer. Feimat tafs the Torah lashon moilech. Why did the Torah use the lashon of moilech? Is kol shem lichuhu aleim. Anyone would go ahead, what? And moilech means lashon to rain. So they would cause to rain over them if they I feel it or even a rock, I feel it kisem, even a splinter. So obviously, the Ran learns. How do you see that he's not learning avodah zarah? Because it doesn't say lelokai. It says as a king. Shem lichu. The Ran learns you're using it as a moilech, as a king, a melech, rather than a oka, rather than a deity. Okay, so that's the opinion of Abaya. Rabbi disagrees and says no, they're not the same opinion. Moilech haroy could be nayu. A moilech haroy is the difference between them. According to Reb Chanina ben Tignis, it doesn't have to be a set of avodah zarah. It could be a rock, it could be a piece of wood, and you're serving it as a moilech. According to Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon, it has to be mamash kavua. So basically, they're not saying the same thing. Moilech it could be nayu. Right. Rabbi Yanai says Rabbi Yanai. You're not chayiv. You have to give it over mamish to the mishrosim of the avodah zarah. Shenemar umeizarach olay sitain. That's what lahavir lemoilech. So you have to give it over. You have to physically give it over. Tanya nami hachi yachal ha'avir v'loy masar. I might think if you pierce them through fire and you don't give it over, chayiv tamad loymer loy sitain. it says you have to give it over. Moisa lemoilech v'lehavir, right? You give it to the moilech and he doesn't pass it through fire. Yachli echayev tamad loyma lahavir. Mosa v'havir shaloi lemoilech. Let's say you go ahead and give it over and they pass it through fire, but not for the moilech. Yachli echayev tamad loyma lemoilech. Masa behavior lemoilech v'leileish, not in fire. Yachli echayev nemer kan. Now it doesn't say over here fire. In the first in Achrei Mois and in Kedoshim, it did not say a fire. It says fire in the pasuk in Devarim, guys. In Devarim it says, oh, it says like Yimatzei b'cha ma'aver b'noy ubitei ba'esh. It says there ba'esh. That's what it says in Shoftim. So Ne'emar kan lahavi v'ne'emar lahalon layimatzei b'cha ma'aver b'noy ubitei ba'esh. Ma lahalon in Shoftim it says ba'esh. Avkan where it says loisitim v'lavir, it's speaking ba'esh. U'ma kan moilech, just like over there it's moilech. Af lahalon in Pasha Shoftim it doesn't say moilech, then it's moilech. Amar v'achabei the Rabbi. Heavy kol zarei potter. As we saw, guys, as we saw in Rashi, as we saw in the Rambam, the Lashon, if you give over all your children, you're potter. Rabbi Bechai says, why are you doing one? To save your other kids. The Rambam said also, good. So, Frek Taisus, guys.
That's not the action of Moloch?
In other words, you can't give all your kids over to you. In other words, you would not be chayiv. Now, when you give one, each when you give one, you gave one. So Taisus has the kasha. Guys, look at top Taisus. Hever kol zarei potter v'im taimar mikama mechayev le. The first one you do yechayev because when you gave the first one, you still had others left over. Let's say what he only has one son. So he gives more one shot. So therefore that would be. So if you have one child, the you can never be what? You can never be chayev for malach. Again, it's a legal loophole, right? Amra Bachabei the Rava. Heavier kol zaroi potter. Shnema mizaracha from your children, v'loi kol zaracha, and not all your children. I have written down on the side over here, Ayin Hakdam L'Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, the Bahag, that it's mashma, if you would give over all your children, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so angry, he doesn't want you to get a kapara. In other words, if you get skill, if you give him Melech, you get your kapara. So if you give over one child, but not all of them, you shave to a kapara. In other words, guys, it seems counterintuitive. If you give over one child, you're chayiv. If you give over 5 children, you're pata. That's pshat. So that's pshat. Pshat is that, again, from the Akdama for the Bahal, Sefer Gedolos, is if you give over all your children to the Melech, you're not getting kapara. You're not getting sleek. Skill is a kapara. You're not getting it. 1 year, but not all of them. That would be explain a difficult concept. Boy Rav Ashi, Haviru Suma Mahu, Yashin Mahu. Let's say you're putting in a child who's incapable of walking because he's blind or he's sleeping. Ben Beno u Ben Bito. What about your grandchild? Whether it's your son's son or your daughter's son. Mahu. Says the Gemara, Tivshet miyachad. Let's be Paisha Mana. Then we're going to be Paisha the last Shaila about grandchild. The Tanya. Now this is Vayikra Chav. This is Parshas Kedoshim, guys. Ki mezarai nasan l'maylech. Again, ish m'nei Yisrael, ish m'nei Yisrael min ager gar besochem asher yitei mizaru l'maylech mos yumos ama aretz yigemor be'even. That's the pasuk in Kedoshim. Okay. So I might think ki mezaru nasan l'maylech. Ma tamid loymar. Why do you have to say that? If you shenamar lo yimotzi, because it says in Shoftim lo yimotzi b'cha ma'aveh beno ubitoy be'esh. Ein liela beno ubitoy. Ben beno ben bitoy minayin. Tamid loymar. Now we're bringing in a pasuk, right? Tamid loymar besitoy mizaroy. Right? It says that. Where's the pasuk? 1 second. It says besitoy. Where's that pasuk? This pasuk is v'mhalim yalimu ama aretz eseinehem manishahu besitoy mizaru lemoilech. So you're you're asking the shaila. You're saying it says lefi shenemar leyimatze b'cha. You're quoting a pasuk in Shoftim, and then you're bringing in a pasuk in Vayikra. You're mixing and matching. So again, you want to know the following. You want to know what's the halacha. You want to know what's the halacha about grandchild. So what's the answer? Ki mizarei nosen l'moilech. Ma tamud lo'imel if yishenemar lo yimatze b'chol ma'avir beno ubitoi be'esh ein li ela beno ubitoi. Ben beno or ben bitoi minayin tamud lo'imar b'sitoi mizarei. Fed Gemara Tana pasach b'chi mizarei, which is in pasuk in Vayikra, b'solek b'sitoi mizar, which a pasuk you began with one pasuk and you end up in a different pasuk. So the Gemara says, you're right. Ein li elazaroi kasha. So in other words, guys, from the words where it says ben beno ben bitoi, you know that what? You know that's grandchild. Good? So in the pasuk in when it says lo yimatze bechor ma'aver beno ubitoi be'esh, when it says beno ubito, you know, guys, that's grandchild. So now, what is Besita Mizaru is going on something else. It's a separate limud. It's not the limud. So we approach Yishayla, grandchild also Yivichayev. Now, in addition, what about a new Shaila? What about that's only if the zera that came from Kasha? Zera Pasaman. Let's say you have a child that's a mamzer. Let's say if you give a child that's a mamzer over to the mother, would you be chayev? Is that considered your child? That's a separate child. Tamid Lomar Besitoi Mizaro. If you give mizaro, as long as it's your child, even if it's a psul, guys, as long as it's your child, even if it's a psul, you will be chayev. So in other words, it's kind of cryptic. You begin with one pasuk and you end up with a second pasuk because there's a shaila being in between. The first pasuk you're being poishet from beno bito, that's afilu grandchild, ben beno ben bito. Besitoi mizaro, besitoi anyone, any zera you have, even zera psul, you'll be chayev for giving over to the moilech. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says Rabbi Yehuda, Ein chayiv ashayivenu derech havara. Hey chidami, what's derech havara? Amar Abaya, shargo delivni b'mitzia. Nura mehaygisa v'haygisa. You would go ahead, put up 2 rows of bricks, rows of brick walls, and on each side of the brick wall you would have fire, and you pass through that. Rava Amar, Rava says, Kimashvarta de Puraya, like the jumping pit of Purim. It's guys, they used to, you play chicken, they would have a pit, they would have fire in the pit, you jump over the pit. Purim, that was your Purim spiel. So he would jump, he would be leaping through, they wouldn't like walk through, he'd be leaping through. Tanya Kavase de Rava, Ein Chayiv Sheyevivenu Derech Avara, right? And it says Derech Avara, Havara Beregel Pata. So you see that you have to jump derech havara, but walking you'll be pata. Now it's mashma you're carrying the kid. The Rambam says you mashma you're carrying the kid. The kid's not going. You only chayiv yoytze yirecha. Those people that come from you hakeitzad. Beno ubita chayiv aviv imoy achiv achaysei pater. But you be pater from your father, your mother, or your sister. It has to be your child, not your blood relative. Hever atzmai pater. If you go ahead and give yourself over to the Moilech, you pater. Rabbi Lazar B'Shimon Mechayev. Echel the Moilech, whether you give yourself over to the Moilech, v'echel the Sharabai the Zara Chayev. This is what we had in the Amid Aleph. Rabbi Lazar B'Shimon Aimer, L'Moilech Chayev, Shol L'Moilech pater. Right? Moilech you be Chayev, Shol L'Moilech pater. So you see that Rabbi Lazar B'Shimon says that what if you give yourself over to the Moilech, you Chayev. My time, and what's the reason? My time, Rabbi Lazar B'Shimon, that a person gives himself over to the Moilech, he's Chayev. On Makra it says, Lo yimatzei b'cha. B'cha means ba'atzmecha. Okay? And the Rabbanon who say you're not, they don't dash in b'cha. Rabbanon who dash in b'cha, they don't dash in b'cha, that if you give yourself over, v'tanan, a Mishnah, Aveidasa v'aveidus aviv, you have a choice of giving back your father's aveda or yours. Who do you go after? Shaloi kedemis, yours comes first. Ramina, my timer, Rabbi Yehuda, Amakra, Efes, Kiloi yev'cha evyain. Shaloi kedemis l'shal kol adam. So we're dashing b'cha. Mashma you. So you see that what the Rabbanim when it came to Aveda is dashing b'cha. So when it came to Moilech, why isn't he not dashing the b'cha? So the Gemara says no. Hasam, take out the vav. Hasam may efes. Hasam, the reason why yours comes first, you don't want to bring yourself to a state of destitution. But it's not from the B'cha. They're not actually in the B'cha. You know why you go first? Because the word efes. We don't want you to be an efes. We don't want you to be a nothing. We don't want you to have anything. Amar Yosef B'chinia. Says Rabbi Yosef B'chinia, Shloisha Krishas B'avodah Zamalama. There's three parshas of Rashi brings each three. There's three psukim by Karis B'avodah Zara, and one by Melech. Two by Avodah Zara, one by Melech. Amar Yosef Shloisha Krishas Shnem B'avodah Zara. Good. Why do you need that? Lama achas l'kedarka. One that you serve the Avodah Zara kedarka. Yichayev Karis. V'achas shaloi kedarka. Yichayev Karis. V'echad l'Melech, and to be chayev someone who's for Melech. For the Gemara, Lamanda Amar Melech Avodah Zara, he Karis b'Melech Lamali. Mandi says that Melech is Avodah Zara, so you already have a Karis from Avodah Zara. What would you do the Karis of Melech? Says the Gemara, Lemarve benoi shaloi kedarka. I need that what if you marve your son to an Avodah Zara shaloi kedarka. So in other words, let's say it's not the derech to serve it by putting it fire, and you would put it through fire. Since a moilech is avodah zara, it's to teach you that a moilech shalei kedarka it would be chayev. Ulamand amen megadef avodah zara he, and the one who says megadef is avodah zara, chorus by megadef lamali. Why do you have to say chorus by megadef? The chiditanya he chorus tikares hanefesh he avoina ba. Why does he chorus tikares? He chorus by lam hazeh. If you megadef chalila, you'll lose this world. Tikares leilam haba, you'll lose the next world. Div Rabbi Akiva. Amalei Rabbi Shmuel, like Nemar, it says Minichrasa by Megadef. If you're telling me that the Hikaris is speaking about these two worlds, there's no third world. Well, at least in this, there's no third world in next world. Ela v'nichrasa b'olam hazeh, Hikaris l'olam haba. Hikaris is Dibutara Klashim Adam. When it says Hikaris Tikaris, the Taris, there's no drush to it. That's the lashon of Bnei Adam, and the other one is for teach me olam had. Cut off from olam haba. Tomorrow's daf, very interesting.